Quadeca's I Didn't Mean to Haunt You is a soul-crushing masterpiece of an album that takes you through the mind of Quadeca after committing suicide. The album contains 11 tracks and spans over 54 minutes. The production and lyrical mastery on this album wows me, and it confuses me as how someone who made voice memos could release a better album than Kendrick Lamar. I'm Tristan, and I'll be breaking down how Ben Quadeca Laksy made the best album of 2022. I Didn't Mean to Haunt You starts off with Quadeca's first song on the album, Sorry for Dying. Sorry for Dying starts off with a beautiful melodic xylophone. A static filter gives it a feel as if it's been projected from a vintage cassette player. This distorted static filter not only calls back to Quadeca's previous album From Me to You, but it also foreshadows the use of cassette players in I Didn't Mean to Haunt You's fifth track, Born Yesterday. An abrasive collection of cellos and subtle violins brings us into the twisted feeling of the afterlife and gives the listener a feel of the theming that will follow throughout the album. Sorry for Dying is possibly the most similar song in the album to the emo rap songs that plagued From Me to You, and this hinders it to some extent. Although it is still an amazing song, you can tell it was made just as Quadeca had finished From Me to You. This is due to the instrumental that follows through most of the verses at the very start of the song, being very similar to the song that featured on From Me to You's deluxe, All My Life. Quad compares his last moments to a car. The line, "fuel tank blink, it's been running in the red," refers to the feeling of Quadeca's life being at the brink of collapse and his impending suicide being closer than ever, before comparing a car's fuel running into the red to him edging closer and closer to his suicide and the receding fuel of his life. Quadeca prays for the mental green light to kill himself. If he's looking straight ahead, he likely plans to drive until he runs out his life. This could also be a parallel to The Great Gatsby, in which a character watches a green light on his lover's estate to preserve his only hope of belonging before committing suicide from the loneliness he suffers. Ben explains the hypocrisy of the people around him never cared for his dreams, but after his passing talk about the greatness they saw in him. Sorry for dying, I just wanna hold you. In my opinion, possibly one of the most important lyrics on the album, Quad describes the pain and difficulty he's finding not being able to communicate and interact with his mother without being seen as a haunting or ghostly fear. This lyric sets up Quad's actions throughout the rest of the album, and especially during his 7th track, House Settling. In conclusion, Sorry for Dying is a heart-wrenching song that remains simple and tasteful, but also carries some of the corniness from his album From Me to You. Tell Me a Joke is the second song on the album, and is also the second single that Quadeca released before the album actually dropped. Tell Me a Joke has a lonely, uncomfortable instrumental, filling the song's theme of loneliness and embarrassment. These opening 2 lines of Tell Me a Joke introduce us to the existence that Quadeca resides in beyond death. Tell Me a Joke begins with Quadeca attempting to reach out to someone, anyone, within the realm he is within. This line implies the fact that everyone only knew the surface level of Quad and his shadow, and not him deep down. Shadows also lack much detail, much like how people viewed Quad before his death. All I could hear were the crickets. Crickets are often used to symbolize a joke not landing. This fits the theme of the song, but also has a hidden meaning of Ben not being able to find anyone else in the afterlife, feeling his uneventful loneliness and only hearing pure ambience. Tell Me a Joke ends with the main chorus, but this time it has a much more powerful instrumental. This gives into the feeling of Quadeca's despair and his loneliness. He's finally trying to crack through the holes, but he just cannot. Don't Mind Me is the third track on I Didn't Mean to Haunt You. The song brings the audience through the mourning period of Quadeca's mother as she tries to cope with his death. The track also introduces us to Quadeca's current state and how convoluted and lonely it really is. Don't Mind Me starts with an absolutely beautiful instrumental that helps introduce Quadeca, his voice becoming more distorted and more distorted as the album continues.
Don't mind me, somewhere between.
Quadeca is not alive, nor yet in the afterlife. He's in a state of limbo, stuck between the two realms. This line implies that Quadeca's mother mourns his death, and is coping via exploring belongings and photos of him. A coma is often compared to a state of a living limbo, as is anesthesia, unable to control the state of consciousness. This is a theme that follows throughout the entire track, and solidifies the fact that Quadeca does not have control of where he is. In this line, Quadeca's mother points to the sky, referring to him as being in heaven, but Quadeca is not. In a state of limbo, he is still able to interact with the living. He indicates this by the line, "I am so much closer." The outro to the song overlaps with the chorus. Quad indicates to his mother that he will help you on the other side, implying that he will assist her to meet him beyond the grave. The fourth track on the album, Picking Up Hands, is the most emotionally driven song, only being rivaled by the ninth track, Fantasy World. The intro brings us through one's perspective on being born. Pick Up My Hands could imply the first feelings of control of bodily function, and covered in skin being the actual birth. Quadeca brings us to his old room by using the line, this indicates that the room has been long abandoned and avoided by his mother. The chorus has Quad continuing to describe his old room and the feeling of distance between himself and his mother due to his ghostly state, despite being right next to her.
Tried to call, but the dog runs away from me now.
Dogs are often presumed to be able to see ghosts, and in this line, Quadeca is indicating that his dog no longer recognizes him and is now afraid of his presence.
I can do it how I used to climb, gravity and get used to mine.
This is a callback to Quadeca's previous album, From Me to You, where the main premise was centered around metaphorically climbing a mountain to reach his goals. However, after committing suicide, it seems to Quad that his mentality has changed, and he can no longer reach that peak, stuck on the mountain as it adjusts to his new weight.
I need you there with me, I need you just down the hall.
Quadeca is depressed and reluctant with the thought of continuing to be without his mother. He implies a desire to bring him to his ghostly state with the line, "I need you just down the hall." These last four lines of the second refrain indicate that Quadeca's home is becoming unfamiliar due to his mother and others moving on past his death. The little details outside his abandoned room now are not amicable to him as they are different than when he passed. The outro to the song refers to a track on Quadeca's previous album, It's All a Game. It feels as if after his suicide his thoughts and existence would just end, that in a childish way it would say,
"Thanks for all my influence. This is what the game was."
Born Yesterday introduces us to a more personal sound. The introduction to the song is led by a simple, emotional acoustic guitar that lets us know that this is going to be a personal song. As the fifth track on the album, Born Yesterday is a bridge between Quadeca and his isolation and limbo within the first four tracks, and his disgruntled breakdown throughout the last six tracks.
I wasn't born yesterday. I think you're goddamn right.
The theme of the song is introduced to us in the opening two lines. Quadeca watches as his mum grieves his loss. By saying, "I wasn't born yesterday," he is expressing that he isn't naive and understands that his mother is in pain in spite of her pretending that she's not. With the bridge, Quadeca samples For No One, the 1966 tune by the Beatles. The lines Quadeca uses are held at face value, as Paul McCartney states that Quad. This implies that despite Quadeca's love and need for his mother, he isn't falling for her counterfeit happiness. Quadeca's new birthday alludes to the date of his death and indicates that his death date is now of more importance than his birthday.
I've been in so many hearts, been in so many prayers, I've been in so many couches. I've been in so many lives, I live in so many lives, I live in so many houses.
These 4 lines imply that even after death, due to his name and his music, Quadeca is still living through others' prayers, lives, and their everyday lives.
I've been trying to unsee how you moved on from me.
Quadeca trying to unsee how you moved on from me is him not being able to grasp the fact that people and his loved ones are accepting his death and moving on from him. Potter's trying to unsee how his mother has moved on from his death and doesn't need him anymore, bringing us straight back to the chorus and how she no longer needs you. Quadeca is suggesting that his mother is saying all things happen for a reason in an attempt to cope with her loss, but Quadeca sees through a facade, knowing that unfortunately not all things need reasons to occur. In these lines, Quadeca is regretting not being more open about him trying to make his mother proud with everything he has done. Born Yesterday was the first single released before the album, and helped to educate those unaware of the album's theme. Born Yesterday is a track full of sorrow, regret, and subtle jealousy that builds the foundation of the rest of the album's pace. The Memories He Lost in Translation is the 6th track on the album, and oh my, Jesus Christ, what the fuck. It serves as more of an interlude than an actual song, only going for just under 2 minutes, but my god does it make you feel some type of way. It gives you a feeling of levitating, and the sounds of Quadeca's past memories playing in the background twists your heart a fucking lot. It's such a tragic conclusion, but makes the song that much more beautiful in the end. How do I even begin talking about house settling? This song has so many layers and meanings that I implore you to listen to it yourself and give your own opinion on it, because House Settling is a dark track about Quadeca's jealousy of his mother and how she has moved on from his death.
I've been alone since when you offered me your forgiveness.
Quadeca's mother has given him her forgiveness, forgiving him for committing suicide. Quadeca is now level-headed. His toxic, delusional behaviour in an attempt to make his mother not forget about him disappears. He is now all alone.
I was begging not to breathe and tried to yell at you from a distance.
Quadeca, now of sound mind, attempts to advise his mother of the toxic air filling the house, trying to yell at her, but to no avail.
Put my feet on the floor, every boy heard a creep, turn it weak, turn the heat up some more, it was spreading, said it's house settling.
This part of the verse is in direct reference to Quadeca's life as a ghost. As he walks throughout the house, he radiates a cold, ghostly feeling. To counteract this, his mother keeps turning up the temperature. The creaks and the drops of temperature don't faze his mother, as she just plays it off as house settling. I Can't Stay Nowhere Else, contrasted with Sweet Home, highlights a sense of bitterness in how his mother is trying to move on. He can't return to her, so in an attempt to become closer, he haunts her. A vase on the shelf implies that Quadeca's mother cremated him, and now all he has for her is a vase of ashes on a shelf. Quadeca can't settle for only being a small part of his mother's life. His ashes in a vase aren't enough. He won't let his mother be, as he demands more. Quadeca is pent up with jealousy. He hates the fact that his mother is moving on and strives to bring her closer to death so that they could be together again.
I feel guilty, I can't say why.
Quadeca is filled with guilt and ashamed over the fact that later in the song, he poisons his mother by turning on the gas stove and flooding the house with carbon monoxide. Words you see through the CO implies that Quadeca believes that his mother will be able to communicate with him once she's poisoned with the CO. The second line proves that he intends to bring them closer together by using carbon monoxide, or by outright killing them. In the third verse, Danny Brown raps from the perspective of the carbon monoxide gas filling the house. Is Danny Brown stating the fact that soon Quadeca's mother will pass from the CO gas, going off on a deep sleep. This line reveals the way Quadeca kills his mother with the CO gas. By leaving the stove on, he releases carbon monoxide in an attempt to kill his mother. How Settling is a song that reveals the jealousy Quadeca feels for his mother and her ability to move on. In an attempt to stop this and bring them closer together, Quadeca poisons and kills his mother with carbon monoxide gas. This information helps us understand in well detail the rest of the album and how Quadeca continues after her death. Knots is the 8th track on the album and represents the knot of Quadeca's personal problems that resulted in his suicide, and reflects on more of the haunting experiences of being isolated in limbo instead of ascending to the afterlife. Knots is definitely the most bombastic and in-your-face track on the whole album, shadowing a little bit of Tyler the Creator's new magic wand and Quadeca on his previous work. The cause of Quadeca's suicide is revealed as him hanging himself. The knot metaphorically refers to confirming a decision and tying a knot around his neck. Quadeca states that he's become a nuisance to the people once he committed suicide. This implies that his death has caused loved ones to question it and use up their time trying to decipher why he made this decision. Ben's loved ones feel uncomfortable speaking his name because of his death. His name has become a touchy subject. They get knots in their throat, they stutter and they glitch. Unsure if it's too soon to speak about him. Quadeca is saying that instead of fading out due to old age or disease, his death instead was sudden, like a TV cutting to static. This also references the ending of the final track of the album, Cassini's Division, in which the song drags out to static, symbolising Quadeca's uncertain future in the afterlife. This line shows the guilt Quadeca feels of poisoning and trying to kill his mother in order to bring her to the afterlife with him. This line is a double entendre, with the son also meaning his mother's son, aka himself. The coldness that Quadeca radiates fills the room now more than ever. As his mother is no longer alive, there is no one to heat up the home. Fantasy World is the 9th track off the album. Quadeca reflects on all the things he wished to have done before he died but ended up not doing. Quadeca himself confirmed on Twitter that Fantasy World is a prelude or flashback to Quadeca's suicide, and the song heavily hints at what could have driven him to such suicide. The reference to counting sheep is a subtle allusion to Quadeca being stuck in a limbo state, waiting to move on to the afterlife.
I heard there's a place for me, one that nobody knows, one that goes away with me.
In these lines, Quadeca expresses his sorrow and his desire to die and enter the afterlife.
So I drove mountains away to a place that ain't real.
The mountains mentioned numerously throughout the track are references to Quadeca's previous album, From Me to You. By stating his desire to go to a place that ain't real, it is presumed that he thinks the metaphorical climb of the mountains in From Me to You are just a facade and he doesn't believe in them.
Where you dream about crossing, it's not a cry for help, to rethink your options.
In the album Movie, Quadeca drives down a 2-lane road towards his fantasy land. He is choosing to cross between the living world and the world of the dead via his suicide. By saying it's not a cry for help to rethink your options, Quadeca is stating that despite his ability to change his decision, to metaphorically take a U-turn on the road, he wants and asks for suicide. Not as a plea for help, but as a release from his pain.
It's the going offline. Next year I'll go vegan. It's not a woe, it's me.
Quadeca compares his fantasy land to common New Year's resolutions and false promises. He believes that his fantasy world is an abstract landscape made up of everything one wishes one could have done whilst alive. Quadeca's third verse hits us with probably the most beautiful fucking shit I've ever heard. It's euphoric and it lets you feel as if you're ascending just as Quadeca is. Quadeca not only has lost the ability to speak in his ghostly state, but doesn't have anything else left to say. His soul has been drained so much from the pain and suffering of his life that he struggles to find anything that adds any meaning.
And I found his way when no one can stay. And I go
In the outro, Quadeca is ascending to his non-existent fantasy world that he will never arrive to. The phrasing of the line, "not in a rush," implies that Quadeca believes someone will only reach fulfillment in their life if they live it out to the end and don't end it themselves. Fractions of Infinity is the penultimate song on the album. Fractions of Infinity is Quadeca's final output before his end in Cassini's division. Ben states that he thought his mental anguish was all in his head and that he could fix it, but he knew that his decision of suicide was set in stone. He was already dead. The last line, "It's funny when you think about it all again," is Quadeca realizing how silly and meaningless his problems in life are in context of an afterlife. Fractions of Infinity resembles that everyone is tiny parts of something that's much bigger, that it doesn't matter how close or how far we are from things because both are infinitely far away. The same is said for humans. Humans will try and achieve their goals and aspirations, and no matter how much effort we put in, we are limited by the fact that we are human, and we can never achieve anything greater than humanly possible.
every time I hear a voice without a face. And every time I'm with you, the clock has waved me out of place.
After Quad's mother's death, she is nothing but a voice in limbo, just as Quadeca is. Whenever he misses her, she speaks out to him, but she has no form in this plane of existence.
Those words don't do you justice.
Quadeca believes that no matter what he says, it'll never be enough to truly highlight how deeply he feels. Ben uses the third verse to showcase how he believes that his life was a movie and that he mucked it up by dying. He uses various movie takes and sayings like,
23, let's get this in and it'll be enough.
This is to show his age, as he's wondering if 23 years of life would be enough. Now let's talk about the goddamn Sunday service choir. How the fuck did Quadeca get them to perform on a track I will never understand, but Jesus Christ, they give an amazing performance, reciting the line from early in the track, "Those words don't do you justice."
Those words don't do you justice.
A Cassini division is a region of two of Saturn's rings. From Earth, it appears as a thin, black gap in the rings. The rings represent a static that is in between, referencing the final moments of Quadeca's ghost, dissolving into nothing but static between the world of the living and afterlife. Cassini's division is the finale of I Didn't Mean to Haunt You, and although limited in lyrical stature, the end portion is what stands out the most. After the final spoken verse, we hear footsteps and distant whimpering from Ben. This could be that Quadeca's time in the afterlife is running out and is not ready to accept his fate. Desperate to find a way out by running from being swallowed away, but ends up fading into the disintegrated and evaporating static, disposing Quadeca's being and conscious all the way. The static section that lasts for around 4 minutes represents the absorption and transition into static after being finally moving on from the mourning of his living peers.